ISP is proudly supported by BCW Supplies. Yeah, all my cards, they fit snugly into a perfect fit, and then we slide them right into an Elite 2 sleeve. Those cards, hey, well, they're resting easy and protected in my Deck Vault 100. Ooh, it's a nice one. Well, all of my spiciest gems, well, they're on display in my Z Folio LX. Yeah, you could treat your collection with love by going to bcwsupplies.com. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off all of your orders. Oh, yeah. And hey, maybe cards might not be your only thing. Are you into coins, comics? Maybe you want to show off your record collection? They've got you covered. Use the code ISP10 at checkout for 10% off your BCW Supplies purchases. BCW Supplies. Protect, store, display.
Hello, this is Az from Go Again Gaming, and you're listening to the Instant Speed podcast.
Well, I work hard. How come everybody wants to shuffle my cards? And I think that it's true.
This is the Instant Speed podcast, episode number 78. Our guest today is none other than Brendan Patrick, yes, former pro, casting analyst extraordinaire, got his hands in so many different cookie jars when it comes to the card gaming. We're going to talk to him. Of course, this episode brought to you by Kayfabe Cards. Go to kayfabecards.com. Telling you, it's where you got to be. All right, the facts, friends. Let's get to those as we're approaching the Pro Tour, which is merely a few weeks away. So you want to get geared up for that. And the way to do that is by knowing that the drafting at the Pro Tour, yeah, the print runs, the different collations and how those packs are going to be seeded, Japanese print, Belgian print, it matters. Well, LSS released an article saying that, hey, we've got a solution, but we ain't gonna tell you, so figure it out. That's what's out there. Lots of articles actually on fabtcg.com. Oh, I don't know, like this one, what to expect at Pro Tour. I just wrote an article. Can you believe it? Yes, I am literate. That has been confirmed. There's an article out there on FabTCG that talks about, what to expect regarding draft, the significance of it, what heroes that I believe are going to have a significant representation, who the dark horses are, who to look out for, and who's on the decline, as well as talking a little bit about the significance of the community element. So you can go check that out, as well as, hey, another article from FabTCG that's focusing more on the collector aspect, such as the drop rate of gold foils. And they're so finite. They have basically locked and loaded and said, here's how many common gold foils, common, rare, majestic, legendary, as well as full art legendaries. There's a finite amount. And they also release numbers in terms of what's in circulation and how many are left to be given out. So gold foil value, in my estimation, is probably going to take a little bit of a hike. And it's probably going to go up because you now know that there is a finite amount, and it's not a finite amount of like, oh, there's a few hundred of these. It's like 40. So collectors, there's been a series of different articles on FabTCG regarding collecting. Great people in the community like Saint Hung and such have been talking about collecting. So you do want to go to fabtcg.com, check out the articles regarding the gold foil distribution and allocations, as well as just collecting in general. Some really cool stuff for you guys to check out over there. Now, this week we do have Brendan Patrick, and we talk about, his Fab Fitness Challenge. What'll it take for him to get back from casting to playing competitively? We also discuss the significance and the importance of team-based play, especially with the draft situation that's going to happen at Pro Tour. And we talk into Flesh and Blood as a top 4 card game in the world. We dig into the numbers and we talk about what does that mean and where does Flesh and Blood go from here. All this on ISP. This episode of Instant Speed Podcast is brought to you by Kayfabe Cards. Located in Utah, Kayfabe Cards is a smart choice for all of your Flesh and Blood needs. Prepare for the battles you'll face through the world of Wraith by gearing up at kayfabecards.com. That's KAYFABECARDS.com and get all of the cards shipped directly to your door. Hey, if Magic or Pokemon is your jam, they've got you covered. Kayfabe Cards has a plethora of TCG options, sealed products, and singles to keep you collecting and keep you competitive. Kayfabe Cards. Be who you want to be. This is the Instant Speed Podcast, and we are welcoming. Hold on, I wrote this out for you, just for you, Ben, because I love you so much. Welcomes a consistently evolving soul in the card game landscape. Do you like that one? That's just the first line. Okay.
Okay.
I dug deep into my liberal arts history, educational history. Firmly entrenched in the TCG culture, he is the co-host of Arsenal Pass, as well as the Snapshot podcast and the greatest podcast of all time, PodCanon. Did you know about that?
Off the back of some rules releases, which was we were pretty much right all across the board. I do want to apologize to anybody listening. Actually, not anybody listening. Anybody watching. I am on the run right now, so as you can see, my accommodations are a bit draconic. But we'll get something up there, a little frame eventually.
Yeah, are you like in the Unabomber's shed right now, or have you located yourself somewhere else?
Popping safe house to safe house. It's been a tough time, Blake. It's been a tough time.
I'm not even done your intro. Like, this is how much I appreciate you. A former pro and current casting analyst, he will be at the desk at the Pro Tour Baltimore in a few short weeks. But welcome back to ISP, Brendan Patrick, on the run.
Speaking of former pro, we were in a meeting with SCG today, me and Flake and others, and they put up a little screen, a little graphic that showed the top 8 graphic, and it had the prizes on there and said $50,000 first place. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing casting this tournament? Because
crazy, right?
Of money. That's a lot of money.
You need to work something like 15 events to get that. Like, and we're getting
pretty good.
I mean, 50 grand is one hell of a chunk of change, man. Like, it's nuts how much this tournament is going to be worth, and we'll dig into that just a little bit. But what I want to ask you, first of all, you're on the run, so at least you're getting your cardio in, is what you're saying. But the Fab Fitness Challenge that you put up last year, is that coming back?
I think so. Depends what people want to do. I think that generally, like a holistic, sort of very broad fitness challenge is the way to go, rather than like a more specific one. But yeah, I was actually thinking about the other day. I think June was when we did it, in June. So yeah, I'm down. If you want to do it, I'm down. I'm down to do it again. I'm definitely a bit fatter than I was back when we finished that challenge. So I've got some work to do.
Yeah. Well, okay, look, so here's the deal, right? Like, I have succumbed to the allure of M&Ms. I went yesterday to buy new pants, and I don't know how much of this is aging. A lot of people say, like, look, dude, sometimes it's just about getting older, and you can't maintain that 32 waist that you had for so many years. And I gave up the 32 waist because I've been rocking the old 34s for a little bit, and now we're possibly, they don't make 35, so we've got to sort of
36.
Dude, I know. And that, to me, like, when I was in college, I was like 36. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And now I don't know if I've just been neglecting it. It's all diet, dude. I'm fully aware it's all diet, but I can't get away from the allure of midnight M&Ms. They're the best.
You're talking to a man who used to be 90 pounds heavier than I currently am, so I understand. That.
Listen, look, and you work out like a dynamo. Like, I had posted a picture of you in your rugby days with your flowing Mufasa mane. You look like some kind of tribal elder. It was amazing. But is it all diet? Is it cardio? Like, this isn't a fitness podcast by any means, but man, like how did you just shed those 90?
I would say 90 to 95% diet. I mean, cardio doesn't do shit. If anybody, the thing is like, if you actually do cardio, it's pretty terrible. And it's a horrible bang for your buck. Diet is by far the most important. I think that they usually break it down 70-30, but diet, and then it's probably weightlifting, to be honest. Because when you lift weights, and I'm gonna get a little bro sciencey with this, effectively, I think you're tearing those muscle fibers so they rebuild themselves, and they do it while you sleep after. So you basically like continually have this caloric burn after, where cardio is more of a kind of immediate thing. And yeah, the input to output is just not worth it, man. If your goal of doing cardio is to lose weight, though, but if your goal of doing cardio is to increase your cardiovascular capability, and it makes you feel good, then hell yeah, do it. But if it's like, I'm trying to lose 100 pounds, I'm going to go run, I'd probably start somewhere else, to be honest.
All right, well, let's do this. Let's do confirm or deny. Leg day is for losers.
Leg day is not for losers. That's the most important one because those are some of your biggest muscles. So they burn the most. And honestly, Flake, as someone who is has a disproportionately bigger upper body than their lower body, and that's for all of my lower body, by the way, you want to be doing legs because the worst thing that can happen is like you finally get a bit of muscle mass and you got these little legs and all the girls are gonna make fun of you, dude.
Yeah,
It's not fun.
chicken legs is like, it's just, you look like a beef on toothpicks, like at a certain
Yeah.
point, right?
This is the worst part of the like the marathon stuff was my legs got a lot smaller.
I'm just gonna call it out right now. Uber every now and then will rock a stream where he's in the gym and he'll talk to people, and not once has it ever been leg day when I've tuned into a stream. Not once. He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna rock this thing here. It's gonna be great." And I'm like, "Hey, Uber, when's is it leg day?" No. We did leg day yesterday. Today's a different day. I'm like, okay, Pep, the absolute liar.
You'd think that he'd be more focused on leg day because the Aussies tend to rock the short shorts, the little booty shorts. So
Yeah.
it's a bit more important.
And nobody can just flawlessly be deposited in the 70s like an Aussie. And like they'll just walk around, they'll have the fanny pack on, the neon
Mustache. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they got it. And they'll even like they'll be like, "What's going on here, mate?" And then they'll just fit right in.
I feel like I'm on Arsenal Pass. Is Hayden Dale over here?
You know what? I don't practice an Aussie thing, but I think I've spoken and played enough Overwatch with Uber where like it has just completely gelled together now. We're just one.
Does he play Overwatch like he casts? Is it just like
Holy shit. I don't even know how to properly convey this without tarnishing his reputation. So I will be very careful how I approach this. I like to think that that's my place to vent a lot of my frustration. And you could ask Tannen, you could ask my buddy House, you could ask Uber. I am like a demon version of who I am. He is the like the beautiful part about it is that it's not like flaming your teammates and talking shit like amongst your teammates at the other team. He'll get it. He'll put the mouse down. He'll go and type a really awesome message to the opponent where somebody will try to do something for him. He's like, look at this kid. Look at this kid. What is he doing? What is he doing here? And they'll kill him and he'll go in the chat. He's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You garbage. And I'm like, so God, like, do they not know who this is? And they probably don't, but it's beautiful.
I'm gonna tell you, Oceanic gamers are some of the most toxic gamers out there, for sure.
Is this like a semi shot at Hayden Dale?
Oh no, Hayden Dale, not much of a gamer. Let's be real. Hayden Dale's a real person. He likes to go outside, hang out with his friends and family. But yeah.
What a loser!
It's
and rubbing it in our faces too. Like I saw him post all of his engagement photos. Like, oh, I'm outside. Oh, I'm talking to people. Oh. It's like, okay, whatever, Hayden.
he's an astonishingly normal person, to be honest.
Like this is somebody where if it came down to it, where I'm like, I need somebody to hold my most precious item. That and when I return in 2 hours, it'll be safe and sound. He's the person I would give it to. Like he seems like a very sturdy and safe option, you know? He's like a Volvo, you know? Not flashy. Yeah. It's good enough.
Like a Volvo.
Yeah, he's definitely built like a Volvo. I've watched him play Mario Kart. He is pretty pathetic at that too. Can't win them all there, Hayden. All right. Let's talk about, you know, I introduced you as a retired pro and how you're going to be basically, you know, the lead analyst on the desk. You are the guy, like you mentioned, we had that meeting with SCG, and one thing that everybody on the panel basically agreed on was that when it comes to analysis, you're the guy, and you've really turned a lot of heads. But talking about prize money, getting back into the ring, you know, you're a busy dude. You've got multiple podcasts. You've got you're dipping your pen in a lot of inkwells here. Is going back to playing on your radar, or are you still quote unquote retired?
I think the Flesh and Blood is the game is pretty hard, to be honest. I think that if you're going to be topping major Flesh and Blood tournaments, you have to be pretty entrenched in the game or be unusually talented. I'm definitely not talented, but maybe I could redevote that time. I just don't see it happening in a game like Flesh and Blood. It's just not that game you can pick up and be fantastic again after not playing it. Like, it's a very challenging game. It's very, I don't know, it's kind of fast paced in terms of like how much better everybody's getting at such a rate with all these new teams developing across the world. Like, I think to be a person who regularly top eights tournaments, and you have to regularly top eight tournaments to make that pro journey worth it. I don't know. I think you have to be extremely talented or be devoting an immense amount of time, neither of which I have.
So is it a time thing? Is it a motivation thing? What does it come down to?
I think that everything in life is motivation based, not time based, right? It's priority based. So, I don't think I have the motivation to let other things fall by the wayside in order to devote more time to trying to top eight Flesh and Blood tournaments. And at the same time, if I did that, here's a little thing about competitive Flesh and Blood. You still might not be able to top those tournaments. And that's pretty tough. I think to be playing Flesh and Blood at the highest level right now, you have to have a genuine love for the game and love for competing, which I do have. But the opportunity to cast those tournaments and still be attending them, still be hanging out with those people, still be in the venue, it's too good of a deal. I think it's too good of a deal, Flake.
What's scary about, I love this game so much, but for me, when I was loading up to go play in, what were they, ProQuests or whatever it was, I played from December through till like the first ProQuest season, like in February, I think it was. I played 3 to 4 hours a day religiously and just crushed. I think I put it, maybe like 100 Oldhim games before I sat down and actually played a game that mattered or the game that counted, And what's interesting is that I've noticed now that I'm not competing, I don't have that same urge. And if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, dude, there's a calling in like 3 weeks and you're going to play in it," I would immediately, those fires would reignite. But I've never had that. And it's a weird thing. It's like tasting something you've never tasted and then craving it later on, but it's not readily available. The worst thing that could happen, it's like there's a Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about duck specifics. I'm not going to mention what part of the duck, but he mentioned how he went by like some very exotic market and found this duck thing. And he's like, I don't want to taste it. What if I like it? And I just can't get enough of it. And then I never get it again, so that's kind of the feeling here. And it's, do you find, or do you feel like there's a lot of players out there that are struggling more with their motivation to play? Like, have you seen that? Have you heard of this sentiment out there?
Honestly, I think the biggest contributor to players winning and not winning Flesh and Blood tournaments right now is actually talent, because I think that the game is so much harder than it used to be. I think that you actually have to be a little bit special to be winning these kind of tournaments. So that's why you see the same players topping over and over and over again. You can sort of mitigate that lack of talent or just sort of natural gift by surrounding yourself with other good players and other teams. That's how I attribute any success that I ever had to that. But I think that, like right now, it's harder than it ever was. And I really don't think it's a motivation thing. I think just the game is very, very skill intensive. So we're starting to see like the ability for just like an everyday Joe to go out and win a pro tour or go out and, even win a calling. That just becomes more and more unlikely, especially as these dedicated testing teams really gear up and sort of hunker down to target these high level tier 4 events.
I think the days of those, like you said, those like random, like those average Joes or those average Judies just going out there and winning a tournament, like you said, are over, because I think that in that first year or two where you're establishing who those names are, and now it seems like it's a record on repeat. It's like, all right, it's Brody, it's Michael, it's it's XYZ. These are the players that, there's like really 20 players out there who have a chance to top 8, so to speak.
Yeah. It's the best. It's good and bad, right? It's good because if you're going to sink your time into a game, Flesh and Blood is one of the best ones you can, because the output is so, related to the input, that, like whatever you put into it, you're going to reap the rewards. Where I think with like a higher variance game, you might not. You might put in a lot of work and then just get a little bit unlucky sometimes. Obviously, over like a larger sample size, on those kind of games, you can eventually win. But you could also be Tan and Grace and just get second every single time. So I think that Flesh and Blood, like if you're going to try to devote yourself to something that you don't want to be a waste of time, you don't want to be the sunk cost of your valuable time, Flesh and Blood is one of the best things, because you really will reap the rewards of hard work with it. But like I said, at this point, it does seem like you do need a little bit of something special on top of that.
So moving into the meta now for Pro Tour, it seems to me like it's been such a short period of time, but it feels like things have kind of finally sort of bubbled up to the surface where there is this big baddie that is essentially Azalea. Azalea is going to be, the number one target that people are either playing or working to beat or play around.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the meta is more wide open than what it might seem, where right now it's Azalea, what beats Azalea and what beats that? Like, are we fully entrenched in this triangular kind of, again, a new triangle of doom, or is it much more wide open than that?
So a few things on that. I think it's the most wide open meta we've ever had for a tier 4 event. I'm assuming, I believe these are tier 4 events and not tier 3. I always forget about the little pyramid. Anyway, I think it's the most wide open class, or most open class constructed meta we've ever had. I don't think Azalea is actually the big bad. I think that Azalea is a red herring. It's actually Oldhim is by far the best deck. It has the best matchup spread. It's the strongest deck. And it's just the most fundamentally powerful. I think that Azalea has had like some signaling from these regional tournaments that we had in the United States. But like, if we look at the sample size of events that you have to sort of try to extrapolate and predict the meta for the Pro Tour, it's actually really bad. Like usually before these tournaments, we've had so much more data to go off of. This, you just have a top 8 from like whatever the brawl, and it's like all these different heroes, and there's an Azalea sort of final. And I think that Azalea is a really good deck, and I think that it will show up quite a bit at the Pro Tour. But I think it's going to just show up as the archetypical like linear aggro deck and will replace some of what used to be Fi and Briar. I still think there will be some Briar that shows up, but Azalea sort of fits that role as this like linear aggro deck, but has an additional disruptive element. It's quite good against things like Iyslander. It has a lot of like, Arsenal sort of interaction. So I still think that Oldhim is going to be the most played deck. I think it's the best deck, and I think that is 100% the deck to beat. Right now, I'm looking at like Oldhim, Azalea, and then I don't really believe in this deck, but if you look, Iyslander definitely third, by the way. But the fourth deck is one that I don't believe in. But if you look at past results, there was a tournament on the West Coast. There's a lot of Jermai, and Jermai is like seems like a somewhat reasonable pick into this upcoming tournament. So honestly, those are the 4 decks I have my eye on as like top played decks, with Jermai kind of being interchangeable with like quite a few other sort of tier 2-ish decks. But top 3, Oldhim, probably Azalea, Iyslander.
Are we falling back into that whole thing where Oldhim will always just be the safest hero? Like it seems to me like it's just it's the 50. It's like at minimum 50s against most things, and Prism's not a problem anymore. Dromai might be, but even then, like you need to be a very seasoned Dromai player with a plan to beat an Oldhim that is packing some disruption.
There's a lot of reasons to not bring Oldhim to this tournament. I think one of the main reasons being is like if you're coming to the same conclusions that I am through testing that Oldhim is the best deck. If you're a new Oldhim player, or you just don't think you're a world-class Oldhim player, you're likely going to face a lot of mirrors. And from what I understand, those mirrors can be pretty skill intensive. So you could bring a different deck just on the basis of not wanting to play long, grindy Oldhim mirrors the entire time, maybe something you're not confident in. But also you could try to target Oldhim. And the issue with like, of course, targeting a deck like Oldhim is that it's so dynamic in terms of what it might show up with, right? It might be the tempo sort of 2 for 8, 2 for 10 kind of deck, or it might be the fatigue Oldhim. And that also doubles as what's hard about playing against Oldhim is how do you pre-board? Right? It can be a wildly different strategy that you're facing. But yeah, you can play the deck that beats Oldhim, but then you also have to be able to definitely beat Azalea and at least have a game plan for Iyslander. It's really tough to do that in this meta.
It is tough because, the way that traditionally you'd beat Iyslander, at least in a couple months ago, was the fact that you run Warhorn, you just blow them out in late game while they're struggling to find them back with like a remembrance or something. That's when you start laying the beat down. But again, it's always happens to be Oldhim is fighting the clock in most of those matchups, and that would probably scare a lot of people off of playing the hero if they're pivoting to it, because like you said, those mirror matchups are absolutely just so piss poor to watch. They're freaking agonizing to play, and it is incredibly skill intensive. And if you bring one piece of equipment that is just incorrect, the inevitability is already there. It's just all right, I'm gonna beat you, but it'll be in the 48th minute. It's like really annoying in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my main thesis for not bringing Oldhim to a tournament like this would be that I don't want to lose in mirror. So if I don't feel confident enough in the mirror, then I wouldn't bring the deck because I would assume that other people would find that, you know, potentially through their testing process, they would come to the same conclusions as the best deck. And then I don't just want to play these mirrors that I feel like I'm going to lose. But yeah, right now it's a very dynamic meta. There's almost no data to go off of, and it's hard to predict what the top most represented decks will be. And I think that if there is going to be a deck that sort of blows the meta open, or is you know, a surprising sort of surprising deck that shows up at the tournament, this is the tournament for that, because we just haven't, Outsiders hasn't settled yet. It hasn't. There's been some small regional tournaments, and that's it. And we really haven't seen that prior to a major event like the Pro Tour or the World Championships before.
All right, let's move on here to part of what the Pro Tour is going to be, which is the draft element, which is from what we can confirm, it's going to be the tournament's going to open with 4 rounds of CC and then end in a draft for day 1. And then we open day 2 with another 3 rounds of draft. Draft is a very crucial element to this. We've seen players kind of flame out in previous Pro Tours or Worlds because they just were not prepared, or they just gave little credence to the fact that draft matters. That said, there is a big stinking elephant in the room regarding the print runs of the cards, that the Belgium and the Japanese print runs have different distributions. That's where we hear a lot of the stories of, well, my one pack had 3 rares, one pack had 1. The seedings of certain class cards are different. And players, pro players, are out there asking actively which print run is it going to be, which is such an outlandish thing to think about, where you have to factor that in, but it's relevant in this regard. And LSS released a statement basically saying, we have found a solution to this. We know that it's a concern. We will not be sharing what this solution is. What are your thoughts on that?
So I thought the announcement, well, let's start off with first. If you are someone that's looking to participate in the Pro Tour or the World Championships, as a player, you adapt to whatever rule set is put forth. Ideally, they give you enough of a time they give you enough time before the tournament to actually sort of, take in whatever the rules are going to be, or whatever the bans, the cards available, and you're able to actually adequately prepare. So I think that no matter what the pack distribution is, or no matter if it's known or it's not known, the most important thing is that they set a precedent, and that the players are able to incorporate that into their testing and then adapt. Because fundamentally, that's what it is. We had a Pro Tour number 1, where there was like some bannings before. You just have to adapt as a player. The announcement itself, I felt like it was definitely very blunt, and I think it was a bit sort of condescending towards, this actually being like a major issue in terms of draft strategy for the Pro Tour, because it is, right. It isn't at post announcement and post solution, but not acknowledging that players having to decide between the two is like, is it going to be Belgian? Is it going to be Japanese? Like, that was a major issue. And I felt like, they kind of addressed it, but then they did. And then they're like, we have a solution. You'll be fine. It's just like, anybody who thinks that drafting at the Pro Tour and at the World Championships, and they think that knowing pack collation and knowing the distribution of a pack is not an advantage, I mean, you're just wrong. It is. You can choose to use that advantage or to not. Totally up to you as a player, but it is an advantage fundamentally. Maybe some of the best drafters in the world don't use it, but I would argue that it is an objective advantage. And that if you have the mental resources to be able to employ that while drafting, it's only going to benefit you. It isn't going to be negative. There is no downside to it. So collation is important. With the new solution, I think that it's totally fine, to be honest, because it's going to be unknown. Players will just adapt to that, and they just won't be, expecting whatever's printed on the box in terms of distribution. Yeah. What I will say, I just want to say one thing that is, some people say that this is less, like, it is more friendly to players in terms of like it being fair. They say that like pack collation and people knowing the packs is somewhat, I don't know, advantageous to players who put that time in. And because of that, it's like somewhat not fair. I saw this take on Twitter. I think it's dog water, because this is actually more advantageous for the players who are going to put the work in, and more of an advantage to be exploited by teams, because what teams are going to do is they're going to remember their packs on day one as much as they can. Then they're going to aggregate that information and try to predict for day two. Will they be successful? I don't know. But I do think that teams and groups of people will have a larger advantage than the individual at this particular Pro Tour for the draft portion. Whether it will actually pay off in a tangible benefit, I don't know, but I think that the potential advantage is significantly greater with this system than it was in the previous.
So for those who aren't aware, basically the correlation issue is that there's the Japanese print and the Belgian print, like I mentioned earlier, has different distribution of where the cards are and such. And where that matters is if you are wanting to signal to the person on your left that, hey, I've got Ninja, lay off Ninja, it's not to your advantage. So that kind of information, picking that card, passing the pack, another prepared player will be able to identify that, look at the pack and say, okay, well, we're missing one common Ninja card or one rare, or whatnot. But the Ninja common is gone. So I know that they're on Ninja. But in different print runs, there might be 3 Ninja cards or there might be 1 Ninja card. So you pass the pack and you are unable to know what was selected. Now, I'm really curious about who said this take. You don't have to say it, obviously. Don't say it. But ultimately, the whole aspect, what was the take that you said was dog water? I just want to hear this again.
So the person was basically stating that this would be more fair to like the average player because pack collation is somewhat of you're employing a level of you're employing a level of strategy that isn't actually like playing Flesh and Blood, right? You're taking the product sort of split of cards and now incorporating that into draft, which it is somewhat of a separate thing, but you take it and use that in advantage. And they said that this new system will be better because nobody knows, right? And you're right if you don't actually think about it. I mean, in my opinion, right? If you actually think about it, it's like, okay, day one, everybody who's on my team, let's say I'm in the Wolf Pack, my team is 100 people big. We all try to remember, how many of this class card, how many of that class card, are we even split? What do the rares look like? What does the equipment split look like? Try to remember as much as possible. Come together at the end of the night, aggregate that data, and on day two, go in and try knowing the pack better than the average player. I don't think that's a problem, but I just think that, this take that like this is somehow more fair or better for just like the random dude who shows up to the Pro Tour by himself. I don't think so.
Well, okay. So I had a whole episode about how Flesh and Blood is a team-based game now. And I had people say like, oh, really? Is it? Because I'm pretty sure it's one person playing against one person. And I was like, okay, doofus, like I get the point of it, but it's like, where do you draw the line on this? Because that kind of logic is something along the lines of like, well, I mean, it's fair if everybody got an 8 hours of sleep the night before, but like the person who goes out like me at a call, like before a battle hardened and got completely, smashed at a casino in Philadelphia with Tommy Fresh and Nick Bolas, like that totally ruined my next day. So like, are we just going to equalize that and say everybody has to be in bed by, 11 p.m.? Like, it just seems interesting where there's an actual active outcry or support of this, being secret because it evens the playing field for the people who are unable to prepare adequately. Like,
yeah. Which is obviously you've pointed out how asinine the original argument is. But I think that my core issue with it is that this system is actually more favorable to teams, which is fine.
Yeah, well, of course it is.
But I think people should just understand that as like fundamental. And I wanted to quickly, since you mentioned pack collation, I want to give the audience like an example that should make sense in recent memory. You're at Uprising Draft, you're at the World Championships, you open your pack one, pick one, you pick whatever. Pack two, right? There is a Spellfire Cloak in there, and there's no Ninja common. What do you think the person to your right is doing at the World Championships of Uprising Draft? They're forcing Ninja. That's what that signal is, at least 95+% of the time. And that's a huge freaking deal. You're talking pick two, pack one. You now have a very good idea of what your opponent's in because Spellfire Cloak is almost objectively better than any Ninja common in a vacuum. But a lot of people at that tournament were forcing Ninja. So obviously that's not going to hold 100% of the time for that core example, but I think you could be reasonably certain and be sort of at least now more aware that the person to your right is maybe forcing Ninja from pick one. It was I think pack collation was really important in Uprising in particular.
So in this case, then let me ask you this. As I try to regain my train of thought here, basically it was that how can you adequately police anything where whether it's you on a team that's established like kayfabe cards or like, any of the other teams that are out there, or you talking to somebody that, that's from your LGS that you go to the same thing and you just share information like, oh, my pack had this and my pack had that. Like, how do you police?
You don't.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the tournament is not meant to be 100% fair. Nothing actually is, right? It's just fair as humanly possible. People get unfair advantages all the time, but the only difference is like you have an equal opportunity to get that unfair advantage. You just, whether you've chosen not to or it's just not available to you, you don't have it. And that's just how it is. You just have to adapt and figure it out. But yeah, teams have an advantage in Flesh and Blood. Like you said, I also agree it's a sort of a team sport at this point. There's no major player that works completely alone right now that I'm aware of, at least. Yeah,
that's totally. I'm like, everybody that's in a top 8, you can probably just go ahead, point at any one of them and says this is 3 to 8 people that they practice with regularly. I know that the Toronto crew at Harry Tarantula are already like 20 drafts deep of practice, and that's what there's a lot of concern about what's the print run. We want to know because again, the correlation, or sorry, the aggregation of data to form a more educated guess as to what's going on at any given moment. It's important, but are you satisfied with the solution of everything is kind of right now even Steven? Because or are you the type where, is there a world where LSS is better served to say like, this is what we did so you can continue to prepare this way?
I think that I'm satisfied with the solution, to be honest. I think that the tone of the article was a bit off and a bit incongruent. But outside of that, I think it's a totally fine solution. They could have also just said, hey, it's Belgian print run. But like they said in the article, it might be prohibitive to people in specific regions. So I think that this is a fine solution. I just think that people should understand that, I do believe that you will be able to gain a tangible advantage by aggregating information based off the day 1 draft to try to predict day 2 draft. That's it. Could be wrong, but I think that'll be a fact.
Well, there's an extra skill set that I don't have.
Could be wrong, but I think that'll be a fact. Sorry, I just realized how dumb that statement was. But.
That's a bumper sticker and a T-shirt put together. Brendan Patrick says, I may be wrong, but that's a fact.
That's a fact.
That's a great tagline right there. All right, perfect. We'll just slam that one on a T-shirt and bring that one. Okay, let's move past the draft portion and talk about Flesh and Blood more so from the global perspective, the economic perspective. There's been a lot of chatter, a lot of talk, justifiably, I mean, to a degree, that Flesh and Blood has essentially creeped into the quote unquote big 4. Now there's the big 3, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Magic. Those are absolute titans of the industry, of the genre. A lot of I've seen videos like Red Zone Rogue. There's been articles on ICV2, a lot of other articles that are basically hyping up Flesh and Blood as saying, hey, like this is our, like, for example, Card Market said that Flesh and Blood was the fastest growing game of 2022. I believe that. I absolutely believe that. But to group it up and say, hey, we've got a big 4 now. Why weren't we talking about the big 4 when Digimon was there? Like, that's kind of the conversation I want to sort of get into here is, does Fab deserve to be a quote unquote big 4? I understand that the data supports it, but I mean, if you dig even deeper, it's like saying, all right, these are the top 3 car makers and the 4th car maker is a scooter,
Yeah. Well, you say the data supports it, but you're right. Like, what does the data actually say? How far behind and are they? Because it could be by a large margin. Does Fab deserve it? I think they're on track. I think that Flesh and Blood has done a lot of things right. I think that they may have, they've done a few things wrong as we've creeped into like a bit more maturity with the game as the game has aged a bit, and it's felt the stress of scale, right? Being an internationally successful game, I think it's put a lot of stress on the developers, on the publisher so far, and we've seen some cracks sort of start to emerge. But overall, I think the game is a massive success, and I think that it's, Flesh and Blood being a top 4 is one of the best things that can happen to the trading card game industry. I think sort of bar none, right? Because it shows proof of concept that respecting your community having organized play and actually sort of investing in your game's, I don't know, I would say future is important, right? Like short-term cash grabs are not all that matter. And, I guess I just look to like what the top three does. And I think that Flesh and Blood does it a lot differently. And I think that's a lot better. And as we sort of come into this TCG renaissance, I would like Flesh and Blood strategy to be the correct one, right? I would like Flesh and Blood to be more successful than a Magic the Gathering, because we might see those other games like Magic, like Yu-Gi-Oh, like Pokemon follow suit in what Flesh and Blood has done in reigniting this organized play and reigniting what it means to actually respect your customer and sort of like give back. And yeah, I would like to see that.
I think that's already materializing, because Magic has sort of revamped their Pro Tour or their their like major events like on paper in person, and that has been significant. And that's after cutting it. Like Flesh and Blood said, all right, you're cutting it. We're coming in, we're investing money, we're putting on the show, and it was a huge success. And it maybe just sort of poked and prod the others and saying, this is something that we need to maybe revisit because it does show value. And yeah, it's kind of a cash sink to a degree where it's like tossing money into a void. LSS, Wizards, whatever, are not putting on these massive events because they're churning out profit. They're putting on these massive events because it's part of the marketing strategy. It's part of the establishment of the game within, everybody's kind of view of what TCG landscape is. Like Flesh and Blood maybe a year or two ago was never part of the average card player's lexicon. Lately, it's just, this is it. This is what it's part of. And this is where I can entertain the thought of Flesh and Blood being part of a quote unquote big four, but it was never a big four prior to this. And this is, again, I'm playing devil's advocate on this. This is a conversation I have. I can agree with Flesh and Blood being within the conversation, but what I need people to understand is, Digimon was there, I think, prior to this. One Piece is making one hell of a move on that entire number 4 spot. But prior to Flesh and Blood rising up to number 4, there was never a talk about a quote unquote big four. And I don't think Flesh and Blood is doing that much better than what Digimon did when it came out and started sort of hitting the ground running. It's definitely better, but it's not leagues ahead of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's also a reason why we usually in big threes and not big fours. Is like there is this, I don't know if it's an economic theory, but there's basically a theory that that most major niches have room for 3 major players. So you think about like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats. Yeah. Like all of these things, it's like always 3. And people use that as a like sort of a market entrance strategy. Is like even if someone is almost monopolistically dominating a market, they will come in and try to get a piece of that based off this sort of like the rule of 3 or whatever. So I think that's why in TCGs we do talk about big 3. So big 4, big 4 might not be a thing. It might just be big 3 and Fab beats Yu-Gi-Oh or beats Pokemon whenever that happens. I hope it does. I do think that I'm particularly interested in terms of like you mentioned One Piece, but I'm really interested to see how Lorcana does when Lorcana launches, because the IP is so strong. And whatever they choose to do with sort of their entry strategy into the market, their organized play, etc. But I think if we're looking for like a potential new big 3 within the next 1 to 2 years, I mean, Lorcana is really the one that I have my eye on right now. I that's not to speak towards the game or anything like that. I just think that Ravensburger with the Disney IP, it's going to be a big player if they've devoted sort of the resources to trying to become that and not just trying to be a glamorized board game or something.
So this is the other element I want to get to, was the introduction of Lorcana, which is coming out in August. We'll dig into that real in a moment. But I also want people to understand that Flesh and Blood also, on the other side of the argument, is that Flesh and Blood doesn't have any presence in places like Target, Walmart, big box stores, that kind of stuff. So when we're looking at the production of cards and sales as a metric to gauge the success and such, I think that it's best to actually look at more of a LGS distribution and what LGSs are selling, because a lot of the sales, like Walmart's going to buy a crap ton of this stuff, Target's going to buy a crap ton of this stuff. It's going to sit on a shelf. People are going to pick it up and pay MSRP, maybe more, maybe less, who knows. Ultimately, though, it's a market that Flesh and Blood has actively chosen to not be a part of.
Mhm.
But to give an idea of the absolute like monstrosity that is Pokemon, for example, Pokemon already has probably the most powerful and global and just significant IP in the world. In Asia, in Europe, in North America, Pokemon is the strongest IP that's currently going in the card game industry until Lorcana. But if you want to get an idea of how many Pokemon cards are in existence in circulation, there are about, I think I did the research on this. They estimated about 42 billion Pokemon cards have been printed to date, and they upped production last year by 27%, where they're going to be pushing out over 9 billion printed cards next year. So they're not slowing down. They're ramping up, which is huge. And where would you, like, how many cards do you think Flesh and Blood has out in the wild? It's nowhere close to that.
No idea. It's a lot of dead trees though, right there.
Yeah, that's sad to say.
I mean, Pokemon's big in the market, because if you've ever ridden in an Uber towards one of these events, and you've had that conversation where it's like, what are you going to play cards? So is it poker? It's like, nah. It's like, it's like Pokemon. You're like, sure. It's like Pokemon. It's just like the great equalizer. It's like Pokemon, but not at all. Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest. I think that Flesh and Blood is a lot smaller than people think, though. Most likely. I think that it is very big in our minds because of the organized play program and the amazing things that they're doing. But in terms of market representation, it's probably quite small.
It's definitely smaller than everyone thinks. And a lot of that is probably because you always have, it's like the same reason why my mom thinks I'm the most handsome kid in school. It's because...
But you might be the most handsome kid.
Listen, I'm not going to say...
You were homeschooled, but you were the most handsome kid in school.
Yeah, screw you, Dad. Yeah. So that said, Lorcana's kind of lurking out in the periphery. And I think that there's going to be a rude awakening for Flesh and Blood stands who eventually see this just ramp up the charts and Flesh and Blood fall to 5 or 6 or wherever it falls. Because One Piece is super successful. Lorcana's coming, and in my opinion, the only IP that can rival Pokemon is Disney. And I think that they're actually targeting the same. They have the same strategy. It's, we want to appeal to the players, and we want to appeal to the kids who just want to collect the cards and put them in binders and trade them. So you have everything there. It has nothing to do about their organized play or whatever. We're looking at sales, and that's where the growth, quote unquote, of the game and what shot Flesh and Blood up the charts was its growth. And I think that's phenomenal. That's a great thing. But people need to also come to terms with the fact that Flesh and Blood is still years away from having their IP in the same league of, even, I'm going to talk about sort of some fringe IPs like Witcher IP or things like that, which have much greater followings than the World of Wraith.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if Lorcana will actually be successful. I do think that it will sell initially. And I think that the strength, like IP, is actually a lot stronger than I give it credit for initially. Looking at the Lorcana rules, which just came out, by the way, I was having a conversation with Sasha, and we asked ourselves, would you play this game if it wasn't Disney? No, I wouldn't, because it doesn't do anything new. It is playing it very safe. It basically takes a few concepts from a few different games, and then it literally modernizes nothing and actually moves backwards in a lot of ways. So it's completely asynchronous turns. Your turn, I sit there, do nothing. My turn. It has damage counters, which are persistent. It has no board space limitations, so it can be very clustered, I'm assuming. And like the interaction is minimal. Does that make it a shallow game though? No, it just makes it a simple game. I think some of the most simple games that have ever been created have been some of the most competitive and deep games. So it really comes down to card balance, in my opinion, of whether that game is actually going to survive past like its first set. But on the surface, dude, that game is super bare bones. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be bad. It really just comes down to the balance and how the game system functions, and that push and pull players, right? Lorcana is definitely going to be a game of push and pull, right? Because there's this trade-off of every time you cash in your resource to try to progress your winning condition, your opponent can effectively remove that resource or that what you use to progress that win condition off the board. So there's like whoever goes first is like there's this game of chicken, and like that tension is enough to make a game very interesting. You know, the different ways you present that tension. But yeah, outside of that, Lorcana, I have no idea whether it's going to be successful, but I think that Disney is a super, super powerful IP, and it's powerful enough that I think that the first set will sell out.
So do you think that, you know, Flesh and Blood, I believe it so far in 2023, you know, I feel like it kind of hit its zenith towards the middle of 2022 and moving into Worlds. And it was kind of a little bit of a tapering off afterwards. Dynasty didn't really ruffle any feathers. It was just kind of like a treat. It says, here, you guys have this for Christmas while we all go on vacation. And then we're going to hit you with the real stuff with Outsiders later. But do you feel like Flesh and Blood is still in a fairly significant growth spurt? Has it tapered off, or is it in decline?
I don't know, because it's probably more of a quantitative thing that I just don't have access to those numbers. But I do think that Flesh and Blood is out of its honeymoon, and people are no longer going to just praise it without critique. I think that nowadays, you know, if they do make a mistake, it does really, I don't know, at least it comes under fire. We saw that with Dynasty releasing after the World Championship, also being delayed, not being live at the World Championship, etc. The set was, I don't know, it just kind of did nothing, right? And no one was really particularly interested in it. And I hate to say that, but it was sort of a really weird release. And I think that Outsiders I felt like there was a lot riding on Outsiders. I feel like Outsiders had to hit, you know, had to make a splash, at least in some of the metas, and be an interesting set to draft. I feel like it was really important for Flesh and Blood. So I do think that you're right, that it's hit zenith. I think that's out of its honeymoon phase. That's kind of what I would say. And I think now they have to actually, you know, they have to be very focused on executing and, I don't know, being successful. I don't think that they're just people are just gonna give them as much space as they did before in terms of mistakes and stuff like that. Like, they're gonna be critiqued as if they're a top 3.
I think you could be both a realist and an optimist together. I think that you can firmly understand the reality of a situation while being optimistic for positive outcomes and whatnot. And that's my approach right now to Flesh and Blood, is that I am well aware that the sparkle of it has essentially eroded. And we're at a point now where we're just left with, like you said, honeymoon phase is over. I'm on the couch with my girlfriend of X amount of years, and we're watching reruns of Seinfeld. Like, am I happy or am I not happy? And I feel like I'm definitely happy. I'm very much happy with the game. It's just this realization where I think a lot of people need to understand that just because the game is not on the tip of everybody's tongue, it's not in the spotlight. You know, you had your day in the sun when it was the hottest thing around, but now you've got these other card games that are coming out that are attracting players from this game that were so devoted to Flesh and Blood. And it's not like they're saying, hey, Flesh and Blood now sucks. They're just saying, this is something new to me. And I wonder how much of that is, like you said, an end of a honeymoon phase where some of the, you know, the blemishes are now visible. The makeup's kind of worn off. And how much of it is just, you know, the consequence of this period of time where from Worlds to Outsiders was this dead zone where the content drop was less than stellar.
Yeah, I think that, you know, Flesh and Blood, in terms of content, it is pretty sparse in terms of, like, you know, what we get over the course of a year. I mean, look at 2022. I think that was one draftable set for the entire year.
Yeah.
I do think that Flesh and Blood is just fundamentally a really good game. But, you know, a game being new is a significant factor to me being interested in, to be honest. Because, like I said, Lorcana, I read the rules and it had, you know, and it said Battle Spirits 2 or something. I just wouldn't play it because it doesn't look particularly interesting to me. I might try it once because it's new. But with the IP and everybody else playing it, I'm definitely going to give it a shot. For Flesh and Blood, I think nowadays it's like if Flesh and Blood had zero organized play, would I play the game? Probably no. I might play it every now and then when a new set came out, but I wouldn't play it like religiously, and I probably wouldn't talk about it every single week. So for me, and I know I'm a massive outlier in terms of like a card gamer, the organized play program really is really the backbone of Flesh and Blood for me.
I feel like that way sometimes where I'm like, why the hell am I playing Hearthstone? Like I play it a few times a day just to sort of do my dailies and just progress. But I feel like if there was some sort of play system or some organized play system where like there's qualifiers and stuff like that I can easily access, I'd be a little bit more inclined to give a shit about it. But like you mentioned, you know, it's like Flesh and Blood. Part of that is just, does this satisfy my competitive urge? Because the game might be good, but if I don't scratch that particular itch, I need to find that satisfaction elsewhere. And if I'm going to find that satisfaction elsewhere, I got to also invest time to be successful at it, to be able to scratch that itch. So I think Flesh and Blood sort of ticks a lot of boxes for everybody. And to a degree, do you feel like there's some kind of feeling that people are pot committed to it now because they've invested so much? Like what, for example, what stops someone like Michael Hamilton from saying, you know what, let's go and just redefine One Piece. Why not?
Probably money, to be honest. I don't know. Like Michael Hamilton, in particular, if let's assume he could be champion, I think he would just be champion at whichever one probably paid the most and had the most reasonable edge, you know, input to output in terms of like, you know, I put in this kind of work, it pays out, what's the variance, etc. But yeah, I think that Flesh and Blood is going to enter an era that is increasingly more competitive. We talk about leaving the honeymoon phase, but also I do think that they're going to be in an ocean full of sharks with, you know, things like Marvel Snap coming out recently, Lorcana on the horizon in the future. And just like, dude, there's like a million other random TCGs that are coming out that are sort of their own IPs, like just going to get more competitive. And I do wonder if there's, you know, looking at Battle Spirit Saga that you recently held their tournament series, it's like, is there going to be this like race to the top, you know, usually race to the bottom, but race to the top to just put more and more money up to try to capture this niche audience of card players that are, you know, want to travel to tournaments? Because it does look like, good for us, but it does look like a lot of tournaments are, you know, a lot of card games are doing this nowadays. Like Battle Spirit Saga, Avril Lavigne, Twitter promotion, but also they're putting up like what, $1 million.
Yeah, no, nobody's talking to like Avril Lavigne does play cards. I hate to break it to everybody. Like, I don't know. Do you know how many people, like, for example, how many people out there have HelloFresh like affiliate codes? You think they're ordering boxes after their freebies are over? Probably not. Like, I hate to tell you, everybody, like those boxes that were on her patio table where she didn't even look at the front of them. She sat down, they took a picture, and somebody wrote that tweet for her. That was what happened, friends. She doesn't play cards.
Chat GPT, the tweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would to meet the PR person that was behind that, because I think that is a hilarious mistake. It's just so bad, really out of touch. But I digress. We're talking about Battle Spirit Saga, Avril Lavigne.
She got, I don't know how many eyes. Like, and so I speak often with Matt Cosmore, the Cosmic, who is very entrenched into Battle Spirit Saga and such. And he mentioned, he's like, look, that this campaign got more eyes on it and more clicks and more views and more, you know, awareness than many others that other card games have attempted. And as outlandish and as weird as it was, you know, you could have literally picked anybody, you know, and slammed it on there. You can go get freaking Richard Karn as, you know, Al Borland to say, I'm playing Disney Lorcana. Send tweet. That would probably get the most ridiculous amount of retweets because there's like, what's the connection here, you know?
I think there's nuance though. I think that not all views and clicks are created equal. And I think that the Avril Lavigne thing actually had a negative impact because honestly, it makes Battle Spirit Saga look like a scam. Like it, honestly, when I saw the Avril Lavigne tweet, I was like, oh, Battle Spirit Saga is doing an NFT because it's just some random celebrity tweeting out that doesn't know shit about the game. And like, that is not normal. And it just makes the game look like it's a cash grab or something. It's super bizarre. So I think that anybody that would look at that article or look at that post, it's probably overwhelmingly negative. But I really wasn't sure about the card templating or all those little pieces of whatever the hell you use when you play the game. But the Avril Lavigne tweet, that sold me.
Well,
I don't think that person exists.
you don't think Avril Lavigne exists?
No, I don't think the person exists. That thought pattern was like, I was unsure, but then no.
She's Canadian royalty, damn it.
Is she really?
Well,
More than Nickelback?
Well, she married the dude from Nickelback, right?
That's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, they were married for a while. She was like my high school crush, dude. Like, that's why part of me wanted her to be into cards, because I'm like, maybe this is my in. Maybe this is my in. Like, Avril Lavigne, hello. I drive past your town when I go like drive to Montreal, a few times a year. She's from Napanee, Ontario. It's like a 2-hour drive from me. I'll come pick you up. We'll go play some Battle Spirit Saga because apparently you're part of it. But look, again, at the end of the day, I think the mantra is there's any press is good press, and I think that's what it is. But I had this conversation. Who was it with? I think it was with the boys from Flesh and Pot or whatever. Either way, it was with DM Armada, and I was talking about how there are people who are actively kind of like reaching out to her or trying to tweet at her and be like, you should try this, you should try that. I'm like, she doesn't play any of this. She doesn't look at her Twitter account. Like, she's an entity. It's like waving at the sun. Like, it doesn't care. It's going to go about its business.
I think people would in general be surprised about who runs the larger social media accounts across all different social medias, Instagram, Twitter, OnlyFans. They're all agencies.
Yeah. Or it's Andrew Tate.
It's all done by agencies, dude. I used to work in affiliate marketing. So I was just selling products on the internet, but we, like a lot of that blends, sort of crosses lines with a lot of like PR agencies and stuff like that. And yeah, all those large Twitter accounts, they're all done by these just companies, basically.
I think that the mission that they put out was successful because people are talking about it. And I think that's what the important element is. But the question is also, like you mentioned, with just jamming out a massive prize pool to attract players, which has happened because there's
Flesh and Blood did that.
Of course they did.
$10,000 tournaments. Nobody knew anything about the game
for sure. And that's enough to be like, oh damn, like, a lot of friends of mine, for instance, like a lot of people from Team Kayfabe are like, I'm going to pick up this game. We're going to learn it and we're going to crush it, because even our locals, the promo card that you win for winning one of those tournaments, you can flip for $400, $500. People want those cards. So even the lowest stakes, like an armory, imagine going to an armory where the prize is like a gold foil. Like they'd be, that's enough to at least spark interest. And I think that is the necessary approach right now to spark competitive interest in the game, is to just really ramp up, not the Avril Lavigne tweets, but ramp up the prize pools. Like $1 million is the absolute baseline that you need to present to get anybody interested.
Yeah, $1 million is hilarious, because I feel like $1 million prize by like the Dota TI, like a long time ago. I can't remember what year it was. Like they did like the $1 million prize pool. I was like, wow. And nowadays, $1 million is like, in card games, it's a lot. But I think in gaming, it's just like like you said, the bare minimum, which sounds ridiculous, but I mean, it's really not nowadays.
It's not. And there's so many defunct card games that put up $1 million that no longer exist. Like Artifact, Gwent is in their last year of producing content before they shut down. Yeah, they all put up $1 million prize pools to start the thing. And again, lots of fanfare, lots of attention, but ultimately these games are no longer around because the substance, the actual game itself, was not what people wanted or enjoyed. Most
important thing by far is that your game has to be good. Like a lot of these games that do offer these prize pools will die pretty quickly as soon as they stop offering them. I actually don't think Flesh and Blood is one of those games, so I think the game is actually good enough. And I think that the publisher is like, I don't know, I think that they really care about their community, and they're very intentional with the product that they create. Where when I look at something like, I'm going to get some hate for shitting on Battle Spirit Saga, but it doesn't, it's going to be my use case. That publisher is in a different universe than Legend Story Studios, right? So I think that if Flesh and Blood was to stop, lower their organized play program, it would be negative, but I think that the game would still survive because it's so good.
So I like just based off certain conversations I've had with James White of what is going to be happening in Q3, 4 onward. I suspect that the conversation that we're having now about Flesh and Blood as a top 4 will be a lot more supported once that kind of stuff is put out into the ether about and I have a very, and I know that me saying like, oh, Flesh and Blood as a top 4 is like having 3 horses and a dog and saying I've got 4 horses, you know, it's like, but people still freaking love dogs, you know, like it's not to say that it's not a bad thing. It's still great because, you know, there's a whole lot of garbage out there, but Flesh and Blood making those moves, I think, for what was perhaps a fairly turbulent 6-month period after that honeymoon phase, Outsiders, if Pro Tour pops off and is awesome, and if it's a smooth production into everything after that, I suspect that 2024, that conversation is going to be a lot less debate and a lot more, okay, well, what's the gap? You know?
Yep.
So I think that's a fair assessment.
I think moving forward, Legend Story can't afford to drop. I think that, you know, now that we've exited this honeymoon phase that we've sort of coined the term for, and now that Marvel Snap is this sort of emerging, massively successful card game, Lorcana's on the horizon. Like, I think it's very important that Legend Story step up and be ready to compete because it's going to be a very competitive environment as we head through 2023 and early 2024.
Well, they've already shown their willingness to invest. They've shown their willingness to innovate and give people the experience over the bottom line, as it were, for a lot of these events. And I think that if they can just continue to ride that mentality, you'll see that we've already seen evidence of other major card games kind of trying to follow suit for what they've done and emulate or go back to what they used to do. That Flesh and Blood sort of took over and says, we're going to do this. We're going to do it well because this is what people want. And I think that is that philosophy in general might not bring the most dollars profitability wise, but ultimately in terms of reputation, in terms of having a solidified foothold on a player base, I think that goes a long way towards longevity and sustained growth.
Yeah, I think that you have to invest in that stuff for longevity at this point. I think if they just focused strictly on the bottom line, that they would just die out like every other new card game that's coming out.
Sounds good. Brendan Patrick, you beautician.
DeMarco.
Yeah, that's me. I appreciate you doing the show, my friend. You're always welcome. I get to see you in a few short weeks, which is pretty rad. Are you doing any of the Realm Brawl stuff, like the Realm Circuit stuff?
Pittsburgh.
Nice. I just got an email from the airline today about my flight home from Pittsburgh, where it went from a noon departure to a 6 a.m. departure. So that's going to be lovely. So I will be out and about at 3:30 in the morning, trying to get home.
In Baltimore, I'm going to be hunting for you in that bathroom. I don't think I caught you at work this time.
You didn't catch me at Worlds. You know where I'm going to be early in the morning in freaking Baltimore? I made a promise to Tall Timmy because he's like,
oh God, I know this already.
Yeah, should I do another Australian accent?
Dude, I might black out and think I'm on an episode pass, so be careful.
Yeah, well, basically, he told me that he texted me. I asked him, okay, I texted him and I said, dude, I just want to start getting a little bit more into exercise and just stuff that I can do at home with like a 15-pound dumbbell and whatever I've got, you know? And he sends me this like gigantic fitness manifesto of everything I can do and that I'm worth it and I can do it and I've got it in me. And then I agreed, because I'm an absolute idiot, to join him at the gym at the hotel in Baltimore at 5 a.m. to work out with him. And I promised him, and I'm a man of my word, so I'm going to be there like an idiot.
Yep. I think Hayden has been to one of those as well. But the thing is, 5 a.m. isn't that hard, but Tall Timmy's going to be crushing gimlets till 2 a.m. the night before. He's just an animal.
The guy is like, I don't know when he sleeps, but I'm pretty sure that he's like 50% man and 50% nuclear reactor. Like, I don't know what the issue is here, but he is also one of the nicest guys in the entire biz. So if you're listening to this, Timmy, I love you, buddy. But yeah, Brendan Patrick, you've got your fingers in many cookie jars, buddy. So while we sign off and hit the Go Again segment for our Patreon only people, hit us with some of those coordinates where we can find you. I know you got a lot of projects going on.
Oh, dude, I just hub it all at That's it. That's all you gotta plug is just the hub.
At Brendan APG. That's it. Just go there. That's it. That's all. All right, friends. Thank you so much for listening to the Instant Speed podcast. To our sponsors at Kayfabe Cards, you can go to kayfabecards.com to get all your flesh and blood needs, sealed products, singles, all that jam, as well as BCW Supplies. Go to bcwsupplies.com. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off all of your purchases forever and always until they tell me to go fly a kite. And of course, our patrons. Patrons, go to patreon.com/instantspeedpod if you'd like to support us. Friends, thank you so much for listening. You're not losing if you're learning. We'll catch you next time on ISP.